Yeah.
Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion, it's gotta go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, December 5th, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty, and joining me in the co-host seat is somebody we haven't seen in a while, Dr. Darrell Ray. Welcome back.
Great to be back.
We're always glad to have you down. As a reminder, today, well, I can't remind you about something that was supposed to happen this morning. So, see, this is the problem of doing live TV. Everything is broken, and it turns out that the promo intro thing is like the only thing that's professionally produced. We've had spills and disasters and shirt changes so that Darrell didn't disappear into the background and all kinds of things. And so we're hoping that you enjoy the live show. Also, and as a reminder, we're still in our reduced 1-hour format as opposed to the 90 minutes we used to have. So I'm going to make the announcements quick, and we would ask that when callers call in, that you try to get to your point quick so that we can move on to as many callers as possible during the time. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. For more information about the ACA, including calendar of events and frequently asked questions page, you can visit the website www.atheist-community.org. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast. The Nonprofits for Yesterday was postponed. We'll be having it this coming Saturday instead, because yesterday Sean Faircloth was in town, and actually he's still in town, but we had a meeting over at the Unitarian Universalist Church to talk about the Secular Coalition for America, and we were really grateful for the people who turned up to that, especially with a venue change. If you missed it, we have it on video, and my understanding is that it'll be posted in the near future. Also, if you don't get through on the telephone today or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That address goes to myself, the co-hosts, and most people behind the scenes. It won't directly reach Dr. Darrell Ray, but if there's something significant and you need to be put in touch with him, not only will we'll be able to give your email address, but we can, occasionally forward things as well. We get so much email that we can't possibly respond to all of it, and we appreciate the fact that some things are just going to fall through the loop. We're not necessarily trying to avoid anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, and we're very grateful for all the people who appreciate the show and write in to tell us about it, but answering all the emails is just not possible. After the show's over, we get together for dinner at Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to that or any of our other events. You do not have to be a member to attend, and we'll probably mention that again 3 or 4 times throughout the show, assuming I remember, which isn't always the case. So you're back in town, and we talked at the Texas Free Thought Convention, and we got a chance to hear you speak there. For those who don't know, Dr. Darrell Ray's been on before. He's the author of The God Virus: How Religion Affects Our Lives and Culture, and you've been going around for a while talking about this, but also talking about the recovering religionist thing that you've done. And so I know you want to talk about those things a little bit. And also I promised everybody that we were going to talk about sex and religion, because I know that that's an interest of yours as well. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, and you can talk about the things you want to talk about, and we'll get to calls whenever we can.
Okay, well, good. Thanks for having me on. This is fun to be back here again. And to talk about religion and how it infects people's minds. And we're going to talk about sex today. And the sex part of it is very important. As I've talked about in the God Virus, most religions would collapse if they didn't have sex to work with. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of explicate before we really got into the phone calls is how religion and sex go together. And I guess I can just go with that, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
All right. Well, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but almost all the major religions are consumed with sex. They have all this energy around sex, but it's almost all negative energy. They say you can't do this, you can't do that. You have all these commandments and rules and guidelines around who you can have sex with, who you can't have sex with. And imagine if if you took sex out of religion, what would happen to the religions? Most of them would collapse. I mean, can you imagine the Pope saying one day, "Wow, I had a great wet dream last night. I think we should let masturbation be legal"? Probably not going to have that happen, I don't think. Or Ted Haggard saying,
I don't know. He started to waffle on condoms a little bit.
So yeah, he may prove me wrong. Can you imagine the Pope masturbating? He's a little bit old for that, maybe. I don't know.
I don't want to imagine the Pope masturbating.
Well, then imagine Ted Haggard, our friend in Colorado Springs, who is now back and starting his new church again.
Because he's completely heterosexual for like the second or third time.
Yeah, well, he got prayed over by all these fundamentalist ministers, and they cured him of homosexuality. They didn't cure him of the methamphetamine addiction he had, I don't think, but who knows. But anyway, he's cured. Thank the flying spaghetti monster that he's healed now. And so he's starting up. But can you imagine him saying, well, here's my partner, and it's a male, and we're going to come out as gay? You know, what would happen to the evangelical movement if they started accepting gays equally? It's like a fundamental, basic building block of the gay.
Right, and interestingly, a pastor has recently done that.
In Atlanta,
yes.
Right, and he was the bishop over several other churches, and those churches immediately left.
Wow.
So he's under some pressure already. I mean, of course, he's a megachurch minister, and he'll probably survive fine. And we saw, of course, the megachurch minister, what was his fellow name down in Atlanta, who was kind of involuntarily outed because it was found out he was coercing some of his parishioners into having homosexual sex.
Oh, is that Eddie Long?
Eddie Long, right. Yeah, I forgot the name.
Which we haven't confirmed yet, so it's still just allegations.
Yeah, it's allegations. Lots of allegations, though, from several different people. But if you put all that together, it shows that sex is a really important part of any religious propagation. And it's all put together with respect to guilt. You have to have guilt in order to have a good religious system, if you will. And so you see Catholic guilt and Protestant guilt and Muslim guilt, and they're all guilt around sex. But if you took sex out of it, those religions would probably collapse. So I think just the thing I wanted to open up with and talk about briefly is how does guilt go along with religion? And what if you didn't have guilt around sex, what would happen to the religion? Just have your viewers kind of think about that as we go through the thing. So
okay.
that was all I had to say, I guess.
All right.
Unless you got more questions.
No, and I'm sure we'll talk about that and other things as we go on. But,
Okay.
I mean, if you want to go ahead and get started with callers, there's somebody who called in earlier kind of to specifically talk about this subject. Rich in Seattle, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, thanks for calling.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me be on. Just a little bit of background. I was a pastor in Texas for 20 years, and in that 20 years, counseled every man in my church about an issue where they came to me and said their wives would never have sex with them. And I understood that because I was in a relationship, a marriage of 20 years, and only had sex 12 times in those 20 years. Now, I'm no longer a pastor. I am vice president of Seattle Atheists now, so I've come a long way. But do you find it that common that you have that issue with women absolutely shutting down completely, and every single man in the church at one time or another was in my office saying, what do I do to fix this?
Yes, it's a very common problem. If you think about it this way, humans are sexual creatures. We are incredibly sexual. In fact, we are more sexual than almost any mammal on the face of the earth, maybe with the exception of the bonobo apes. And the way we understand that is think about how many times a human being has sex per live birth. And you got to look at it over a lifetime. So if a couple has 2 or 3 children, in their entire lifetime, how much sex are they going to have? And let's include masturbation. So you got intercourse and masturbation. Humans have thousands and thousands of sexual encounters over a lifetime. We are incredibly sexual creatures. So, understanding that, humans like a lot of sex. Thousands of times for every time we conceive. So what that tells us is our natural predisposition is towards lots and lots and lots of sex. And the biology points to that. I want to come back later and talk about the biology. Now, what's that got to do with your question? Well, think of if the human's normal disposition is that strong for that much sex, what do you have to do to a human being to make them afraid of sex so they'll only do it 12 times? Something huge had happened to your wife or happened to these other women in your church, something traumatic, devastating to them had to happen to make them not want sex. Because women can have far more sex than men can. I mean,
yeah. Now there may be some people whose natural disposition is to not want to have sex. They may be asexual, etc.
Right. But only about
But we're
1%.
talking about, yeah.
Only about 1% of the population is asexual.
What you do is if you find, for example, in a Pentecostal church like what you're talking about,
Yes.
where a large percentage of them are like this, it's unrealistic to say that it just so happens that the 1% or so who are largely asexual happen to propagate towards this church. In fact, it seems reasonable to presume that there is something within, at a minimum, within the doctrine of the church that is changing these people's views about sex. But even if that's not the case, there's something about the doctrines of the church that would attract these people. So in either case, there's something about the foundations of a particular religion that either causes this or attracts people who are already of this disposition. So the problem is still, to some degree, within that religious, doctrine.
There's a good comparison to make here. Think about anorexics. Anorexia is a disease that we see as self-starvation, basically. Well, that's an appetite. It's the total denial of an appetite. Well, sex is an appetite too. How do you get somebody so afraid of sex that they won't act on that appetite? Maureen Winnell, the psychologist out of the San Francisco area, wrote a great book called, shoot, I just forgot the name of the book, but you look it up, Maureen Winnell, I'll think of it before we're finished. She has labeled this, and she calls it religious trauma syndrome. Kind of like post-traumatic syndrome, only it's religious trauma syndrome. Many people who are brought up in religious environments are traumatized by that religion. And since, like I said right off the bat, so much of religion is focused on sex, then there's religious sexual trauma going on with these. People are being given all sorts of very devastating messages when they're children. And your wife may have been one of them, probably many of the women in your church. But not just the women, men too. Men have these problems as well. You just happen to be a man that men were coming to. I don't know if the women came to you, but I'm sure there were women that could have come to you and said, my husband is afraid of sex or can't have sex except in a certain way. And
I never had a woman come to me and say anything like that. Never had one of the women from the church approach me at all. But back to what you were saying earlier, the church, there was extreme anti-sex messages. I mean, sex is just plain wrong, except by two married adults, and of course it is so hammered into people. And I think also in the particular church I was in, it was also a bit of control, a bit of mind control.
Yeah.
So much of it was misogynistic that it was a way that the woman could actually assert some authority.
Yes, absolutely. And that is oftentimes the woman's only outlet is to stop having sex with somebody, with their husband or, whatever. So
yeah,
you're right.
And quickly to touch on a couple things, because I got the chance to talk to Marlene Winnell when we were at the Free Thought Convention as well, and we've talked about it a couple times. And what she specifically deals with religious trauma syndrome are people who have escaped religion and are finding life entirely unmanageable and suffering depression and other things as a result of what's happened with the religion. But I think Daryl's point is good in that the things that cause this religious trauma syndrome once you've escaped are present while you're in it.
Absolutely.
And it is this turmoil that's causing this problem. There are a number of churches whose position is that sex, as you point out, is exclusively between two married individuals and for the purpose of procreation. Now, what that does is it takes on one of either two forms. You either end up in a relationship where the only time you're having sex is if you intend to bring a new child onto the planet, in which case you might only have sex 12 times in 20 years. And the other extreme is to do what the Quiverfuls are doing, which is to just have sex all the time and spit out 18, 19, 20 kids, which is another problem in and of itself. And obviously they're not as traumatized about sex as other people are, but